Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Just a moment. Oh, there we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, February 28th special meeting of the Wall Township Board of Education. At this time, please join me and our Wall High School NNDCC cadets in saluting the flag.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carry. Coast. Cut. Right. Face. Forward. March. Color on. Halt. Order. Up. Cut. Color guard dismiss. Action.
Thank you. As always, we really appreciate our NNDCC cadets for coming out, and we'd also like to thank Colonel Jacks, who's come out this evening, working with our cadets and doing a beautiful job of really getting NNDCC moving in an outstanding and excellent position. So we're really proud of them and all the progress that is being made there. Now, Mr. Smythe, our board secretary, will you please read our sunshine announcement and perform roll call?
Yes, this is the Wall Township Board of Education meeting for which adequate notice under the Open Public Meeting Act was provided by a notice to the Co-Star, Asbury Park Press, Township Clerk's Office, all Wall Township Public Schools, and in the Board Administration Office on January 25th, 2024. Take a roll call. Mr. Anizio? Here. Ms. Barbier?
Here.
Mr. Buffa?
Here.
Ms. DiGiovanni?
Here.
Mr. Malif?
Here.
Mr. Nasser?
Here.
Ms. Shimko?
Here.
Mr. Wondrak? Ms. Stites.
Here. Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to be opening the floor for public comment on school-related issues. If you have any public comment, please come up to the podium.
Hi, my name is Betsy Cross. I live in Wall Township, and I just wanted to go over a few things. I just gave a copy to Tim Tehan. He works for the NJSBA. He's your new representative, so I wanted him to have copies of what I was going over. Mine all have to do with pretty much Oprah request, outstanding, late, things that just, you know, the nonsense that goes on and on. I had gotten back some bank statements from Mr. Smythe, and I'm not following this whole Cattell payment and the subcontra of Precision. So we really need an explanation on this, and we need you to just give it to us. I shouldn't have to keep Oprahing it. And Adam Nasser, chair of F&F, didn't even know who the person was. He documented his minutes wrong, said it was 2 union reps that brought it up, when no, it was Kathleen Duran and myself. If you can't get your minutes right, you're not going to get anything right, Mr. Nasser. You got to do better. Or just, I don't even think you should be
Mrs. Cross, please direct your comments to me.
I don't even think you should be oh, okay. Could you follow up Mr. Nasser on that? His minutes are wrong. He needs to fix them. Okay? Thank you. I also asked for Adam Nasser's text message, emails, Facebook screenshots that contain the name Betsy Cross, Michael Shelton, Doherty, or attorney from 12/11 to 12/21/2023 and from 11/25/2022 to 12/5. Never got it back. The nonsense I'm getting back from Mr. Smythe It's absurd. He just keeps saying, do you need this? Do you need that? No, just give me everything that I'm asking for. I've also asked for Christine Stites, Ralph Venanizio, Kristen Honda, Thomas Buffett, James Malf, and Kathleen DiGiovanni. I'm waiting for that. Boy, oh boy, I can't believe the amount of redactions in minutes, so hopefully you can get them on the screen. We got lawsuit after lawsuit. I can tell who you're talking about. You're talking about me, you're talking about Jenny DiCarlo, you're talking about the child injured in the trailers. You just redact everything that you can. You need to do better before you get sued. So you need to go through them again, and you need to unredact what you have to unredact. You can't just keep hiding this. Invoices. Gave that gentleman $10,000 for my last lawsuit. That went to the JIF to pay. You had to cut a check to the JIF, and $41,000 on my last one. It gets very expensive. You're getting bad legal advice, and you have a bad business administrator. It's a deadly combination. You need to do better. You need to turn these documents over before you get sued again, because every time I do it now, you lose. So please go over Cattell and Precision tonight.
Thank you, Mrs.
And please
Cross.
let me know that you're going to follow up, Ms.
Thank you,
Stites,
Mrs.
as the
Cross. Your time
president,
is
to get
up.
me these documents.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have anyone else for public comment this evening? Seeing none, we'll close the floor for public comment. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Handerhan for introduction of our speaker this evening, and for a little explanation of what it is that we're doing here this evening as a Board of Education.
Thank you, Ms. Stites. This evening, it's my pleasure to inform our public that we are conducting the 2024 ethics training for the Board of Education, and we have a very distinguished guest with us this evening to provide our training, and that is Dr. Timothy Tian. He is a field representative, our new field representative for New Jersey school boards, and we are incredibly excited to have him join us and meet him this evening in person. I enjoyed our phone calls before this evening in planning our very important ethics training. On behalf of the Board of Education, I welcome you, and we look forward to your presentation. So thank you.
There you go. Hello? Well, I've never been called distinguished, so I'm proud of that. My name is Tim Tian. I am for New Jersey School Boards, and I'm here. I replaced Mary Ann Friedman as the field service rep for Monmouth County. Mary Ann and I are still working together on a lot of superintendent searches and the strategic planning that's going on in Monmouth County as well as other counties. So we've been very busy. So you just have me tonight, though. So tonight we're going to be doing ethics. And after the presentation is over tonight, I'll email you the presentation and anything else. If anything else comes up, I'll send that along too. And then this way it can go out to the whole board afterwards. The nice thing about the presentation when it's sent out in PDF, there's hyperlinks in it, and I'll point that out during it, that will bring you to a lot of the cases that we're going to talk about. So just a disclaimer, I am not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. I never pretend to be one, though I do enjoy the law, and it is frustrating sometimes. But I do not give out legal advice. I only give out legal information. The only person you can get legal advice from, and you should get legal advice from, is your board attorney. That's the person who represents you. So New Jersey School Boards does have an attorney of the day that any board member can call. You can ask questions, but once again, that'll just be legal information. But it's always nice to have a couple different resources available to you. So all of you are school officials, and you're in these highly paid and respected positions. And every day is an easy day for board members across the state of New Jersey. But as part of that, you do serve the public. And because you're all in these positions, the public has voted you in. And as part of that, the School Ethics Act has actually established minimum standards that board members are expected to uphold in your duty as a board member. So because of that respect and confidence, you as a board member have to avoid conduct or even the impression of conduct that violates one or more of the Code of Ethics tenets. So the School Ethics Act was actually established in 1991, and as a result of that, they formed the School Ethics Commission, also known as the SEC, and it does not deal in any stocks or bonds. It's strictly the School Ethics Commission, but in education, they love acronyms, so that's its acronym, even though it was used by somebody else. They also established prohibited acts, the mandatory trainings that board members have to go through, the disclosure statements, personal, relative, financial statements, but that is not, just so everyone knows in the public too, it's not asking you how much money you make, it's just asking you where the sources of your income comes from. And then the Code of Ethics, the 10 tenets, were actually established 9 years later in 2001. So who is accountable to these Code of Ethics? Well, anyone that works in the public school with an administrator cert, which means a superintendent, the BA, any other principal or assistant principal, they would all be accountable to that. Anyone that works at New Jersey school boards is accountable to it. All of you as board members are accountable, and anyone that works in a charter school as a similar position as a board member would also be accountable to these. So as a result of that, you have conflicts of interest and disclosure statements that apply to all of us. However, because you guys are board members and you're so special, you get 2 more. You also have the Code of Ethics that you have to abide by, as well as the mandatory training. And school board members are the only persons that have to engage in mandatory training, which is interesting because we were just talking about that today at the office, that the legislature is the one that actually determines this, yet they don't have to go through mandatory training. So they're telling you you do, but they don't. So I just think that's interesting. So the School Ethics Commission is actually made up of 9, it's supposed to be made up of 9 individuals. 2 come from school administrators, 5 are non-school officials, and 2 are school board members, and these are appointed by the governor. However, at this current point in time, there's only 6 members that are currently sitting on the SEC. And that is important because when we talk about advisory opinions, that comes into play. So the SEC can do 2 things, it has 2 jobs. The first one is advisory opinions, and the second one is our ethics complaints. Advisory opinions are, think of them as being proactive. It's you as a school official are possibly going to engage in something, and you want to make sure before you do it that it's okay for you to do it. So you as a school official can request an advisory opinion from the SEC, and it's simply writing a letter to them and giving all the details of your situation. You send it in, and then they make the determination, and they give that advisory opinion for it. If they think it's something that's just very specific to you here in this district, they'll tell you and give that to you, and that will be only for you. However, if they think the item that you've put forth has a much more far-reaching impact, meaning other school districts in New Jersey might be struggling with the same question, then they can vote to make that advisory opinion public. In order to make it public, they need 6 positive votes. There's only 6 members now sitting on the board, which means it has to be unanimous now at this point in time for it to become a public advisory opinion. They'll still issue the advisory opinion, it just might not be public. And then ethics complaints are after you have potentially done something wrong, meaning you've potentially broken one of the tenets of the Code of Ethics, that's where anybody in really anywhere can file a Code of Ethics complaint against you. Now, it's easy to say they're going to be able to file it against you. However, it's not as simply as just saying, I think so-and-so broke tenet A. They actually have to provide the factual evidence along with their submission. So it's a lot more involved than just making a claim. So mandatory training as board members, if you're new, then you've been going through the new board member orientation, which is Governance 1, and that gives you your basic knowledge. As a new board member, you actually have 90 days to complete that from the time that you're sworn in. This is not from New Jersey school boards, this is actually from the legislature, so don't blame us that you have to go get training. By the end of year 2, then you have to take Governance 2, and that is focused on finance and labor. End of year 3, you have to focus on student achievement. That's in governance 3. And then every year you're reelected, you have to take governance 4. So that's legal updates. And that's important because the law does change all the time. There's new legal cases every day. So that's a way for you to keep updated on what's going on and what's impacting education. All of these trainings, all 4 of them, are actually provided in person, live virtual, and self-paced online. For Governance 1, they also offer a new board member orientation weekend-long event. The second one just happened. So that's where you go for a weekend and you're with other brand new board members, and it's an intensive, basically 3 days. So as I said before, the disclosure statements, it's not going to ask you how much money you make. They used to do it by paper. Now it's mostly digital. Your BA will send out a email to you that will say, fill out your financial disclosure statement. You do it. It's just saying where your source of income is coming from. If you do something wrong after you hit submit, it actually does not go to the state. It actually goes to the BA first, who reviews it, and they might kick it back to you. So don't be surprised. I've had them kick back to me too. So as a new board member, you have 30 days to do that, but every other board member, you actually have until April 30th. This is important to make sure you hit the deadlines because this is a CUSAC issue. Okay, so if one or more board members don't meet those deadlines, then you will lose points on your CUSAC evaluation. And for those that don't know what CUSAC is, that's every 3 years, the state comes in, the DOE comes in with their team, and they monitor for compliance. Not for quality, they monitor for compliance. So if you do something wrong, what are the things that can happen to you as a board member? There's 4 different things. The first one is a reprimand. Think of that as a slap on the wrist. So they will say to you, you violated tenant A, bad, 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 don't do it again, and that's it. Censure is more serious. That's more public. So what happens with a censure is that not only will they tell you bad, 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 you violated A, B, C, D, whatever, the board is actually required to pass a resolution naming you as the person, what tenants you violated, and say that you broke the code of ethics. So it's much more public, much more out there, so you really don't want to hit the censure part. You really don't want to hit any of them, but definitely not that. Then you go to the next one, which is suspension. So they can make the determination that the violations that you caused were serious in nature and therefore suspend you from the Board of Ed. So that could be for whatever amount of time they determine. It could be a month, 3 months, a year. It's up to them. And then the last one is a removal. So they could say you were so bad in the decisions that you made and that was so serious, therefore you're no longer allowed to be a board member. Now, when something is submitted as an ethics complaint, it actually goes to the SEC first, and they make their initial determination. Then it goes to the Commissioner of Education, who makes the final determination. And when we start to look at some of the cases, you're going to see recommended, it might say recommended reprimand, or it might just say reprimand. When it says recommended reprimand, that means that it's only gone through the SEC and it's currently with the Commissioner of Education to make that final decision. If you just see the word reprimand, it means it's gone through both, and that is the final decision. So we're going to go through the 10 tenets, and I do not read them to you, just so you know. But I think it's important to understand that these are actually in statute and code. So the top part that you see in that lime green, that actually comes from statute 18A. And the bottom part is from code, administrative code 6A. So when you look at the top part, that's telling you what you're expected to do. The bottom part is for if you break that, and somebody claims that you break that, then that's the factual evidence that they have to provide in submitting any kind of a ethics complaint claim to the School Ethics Commission. So you can kind of see it's going to have some details there. So every single one of these has that. So like that's when I said before about how it's not as simple as just filing a complaint and saying so-and-so violated A. They've actually have to have the evidence to prove that. If they don't submit that with their claim, the SEC will not look at it any further than that. They'll kick it out. Okay, so just so you know, it's not a simple process for people. But the first one is uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations. You have to follow the law. You don't have a choice. You might not agree with the law, the regulation, or the rule. It doesn't make a difference. You have to follow it. There's other avenues to challenge laws and all that, but you still have to follow the laws and the regulations and the rules that are out there. The second one is that you have to make decisions in the best educational welfare of children, all children, not just the ones you like, not just the ones you want to advocate for, it's for all children. And when appropriate, you're going to meet with the, maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children. Next one's that one. So confine your board making action to policy making, planning, and appraisal. Those are the three things that board members do. When appropriate, then you're going to consult with individual stakeholders to get their input. So in other words, if you have a policy that's going to impact, let's say, the administrators in the district, you would consult with them. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to do whatever they say. You're simply letting them know that this is a policy that you're putting out there, and they might give you some feedback on it. Where does that happen? It can happen at a board meeting. That's totally appropriate. The next 1D is not to administer the schools, but see that they are well run. Most boards of education struggle with this one. You sit in a position, you have a lot of information, and everyone has an opinion, okay? But your job as a board is not to run the district. Your job is to just oversee it and make sure that it's well run. I use the word what and how, those two words. You're the what as the board. When you are presented with something and you look at it and you say, well, what do I want to happen here? That's okay. That means that's within the purview of the board. The minute you say, well, we want this to happen and this is how we want it to happen, now you've moved into the how, because you're saying this is the steps we want to go through. That means you've overstepped and you're now trying to run the district. That would be a violation of this code. So always ask, it's very simple, what, how. Every time you're going to do something, say, is this a what or is this a how? And don't get confused. The next one is that understand that the authority rests with you as a Board of Education, meaning you as an individual have zero power. It's only as a complete board when you're sitting at an legally advertised meeting where you have an agenda with resolutions on it that you can take action, and that's where your power comes in. It's in the majority of the board when you have a quorum of the board, okay? So you can't make private promises or, hey, I'm going to do this for you. That's not appropriate at all, okay? It's what the board decides is the best action. So even though you're an independent person, an individual, and you have your own opinions, you have to make sure that you do not give in to public pressure from especially political groups, which really have made their way into public schools. And you cannot do anything for the personal gain of family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, coworkers. You really are here for one reason only, the students. And if you always keep that as your central focus, you will make the right decisions. To me, this is the most important one, confidential. As a board member, you are privy to information that the public is not, and that's purposeful. That's why you have executive session. In executive session, those items that you meet in there for are supposed to be private. And that always has to do with student issues, staff issues, because you're dealing with names there, legal issues, school safety, certain things within school safety, legal issues. I always forget all of them. But that's where a BA comes in. They always make sure, like, no, that's an executive item. So all the executive items definitely are confidential items, but you're also getting communications from your superintendent about different things that are going on in the district. Once again, it's confidential information. It's to inform you so that you can make the best decisions as you move forward. And then appoint the best qualified personnel available. Understand that on your board agenda, it'll always say for personnel, by recommendation of the superintendent of schools. It's not your job to do the interviews. It's not your job to select the person or persons that you want on that agenda. That's the superintendent's job. That's why it says recommendation of superintendent. However, you also have to understand that even if you don't like that candidate, that position might have been very difficult to fill. And there might have only been one candidate for it. So even though it might not be the best, it might be the only. And I had that. I had where I had a very, very difficult to fill position. I had one person apply for it. And I had my principal come in to me and she said, you're going to be meeting with the candidate. And I said, okay, you've never come in to tell me I'm meeting with the candidate. She goes, she has a pulse. I said, oh, that's not good, okay? So understand that that does happen sometimes in education, especially now where there's a shortage of staff members. And with the DOE, with the constant changes in certifications, you're having sometimes for certain positions less and less individuals that are able and qualified to work in those positions. And support and protect school personnel. That's your job. You cannot undermine the school staff in the district. And we're going to talk about one case where it's a great example of where a board member undermined the staff member. And the staff member can be an administrator, it can be a teacher, it can be a custodian, it can be a secretary, it can be anyone that works in the school district. Refer all complaints to your superintendent of schools. Now what that means is it's a chain of command, and I'm going to get into the chain of command in a second. But understand that when you get a complaint, the first thing that you should do is redirect that person to the chain of command, but then also loop in your superintendent. Let her know what the complaint was. Not that she's going to act on it, because she might determine that that's not appropriate, that based upon the situation that's presented, and she might allow it then to do what it should be doing, which is going up the chain of command. So why is the chain of command important? Even though the public thinks that they're going to go right to you as a board member, and you're going to go right to the superintendent, and you're going to get that problem fixed. So I'm Tim Tian, and I go to board member A, and I say, my child's teacher, I don't like them. They're doing X, Y, and Z. Go tell the superintendent to fix it. Okay, so the board member decides not to redirect me to the chain of command, which would be back to the teacher, because that's generally, in that case, that would be the lowest level in the chain of command. Instead, board member A decides to go to the superintendent, share that, and say, you got to go fix it. So let's say the superintendent decides, all right, I'm going to go fix it. Her next step will be to go to the principal of the building and say, this was brought to my attention, this parent, Tim Tian, he said this. The principal then has to go down to the teacher, because the principal and the superintendent are not in every class every minute of every day. You wouldn't want them to be. That's why the teacher's there. So then the teacher says, okay, no, here's my response to that, goes to the principal, which then goes to the superintendent. Superintendent then reaches out to the parent, and what do you think the parent says? Yeah, but that's not the whole thing. And so they say the next part of it, and it has to go back down the chain and then back up the chain, which means it takes forever. So in order to come up with a quick solution, follow the chain of command. So when somebody comes to you with a concern or a complaint, say, I hear what you're saying. Don't say I agree with you. Just say, I hear what you're saying. Go to the teacher, which is generally where it starts, or go to the principal, if that's depending on what the concern is. Follow the chain of command, and it will make its way. The only time it will come to you is if it's gone through the full chain. You guys are the last link in that chain. When it comes to you, then by all means, you can hear the case and you can talk about what would be the best resolution to it. Do not solicit means do not go out and look for good and bad going on in the district. So in other words, let's say you have a new math program or a new math resource. If you're going to a teacher and saying, hey, how's that math resource working? That's soliciting. You're asking for feedback on something. You can't do that. That's the job of the administrative team in the district. That's what they're supposed to be doing. That's the how. You guys remember are the what. So lowest level, and always, always, always notify the superintendent so she's in the loop. Staying in your lane, that's so important, and I use this as a reason. So let's say we're driving on, and there was an accident or something out here before because there was a lot of ambulances, and maybe this isn't a good example right now, but let's say we're driving, right? And you're driving as a board member next to me, and I'm the superintendent, and we're going in the same direction. That's great, right? We're both going in the same direction. Because I'm a really good driver and you're not, you come over the line a little bit, right? So what are you going to end up doing? You're going to end up hitting me, right? We're going to get into a little bit of a fender bender. But at least we were going in the same direction. But you didn't stay in your lane, and that's what caused that minor accident. But let's say you're going the opposite way as I am. We're going in two totally different directions. And once again, I'm a good driver and you're not. You come over the line. We're going to have a major accident, right? So it's important that you not only stay in your lane, but you're all focused on the exact same thing. You're all going in the same direction. You know what's the most important thing, which obviously are the students of the district. So this is like a nice summary of the board and superintendent roles. This is the what and the how. So when you look at roles and responsibility, the board works on vision, mission, goals, and policy. That's what. The superintendent decides what are the objectives, what are the procedures, what are the action plans, and what are the regulations. Board does policy, administration does regulations. In a lot of districts, the boards will approve regulations, but however, you don't write regulations. That's the job of the superintendent and administrative team. That's the how of how they're going to carry out whatever that associated policy is. The focus is the end results, the what. What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you trying to accomplish this? And how much do you want to accomplish? The how is the superintendent. How will I do this? When will I do this? Where will I do this? Who will help me do this? The action is voting and evaluating. You evaluate one person in the school district, and that's the superintendent. Voting, you do every board meeting. When you have an agenda and you have those resolutions and you say yay or nay, that's a vote, okay? The superintendent recommends. That's why on the agenda it says recommended by the superintendent of schools. But she also implements. So whatever plans are there, whatever the decision is for a plan, they're the ones that actually, she's the one that will actually implement it. So these are a bunch of cases, and as I said to you guys, these will be all linked. So when you see on the left-hand side where it's blue, it's blue, those are hyperlinks. So this is a short summary of each one of these cases. If you're a legal nerd like me and you like to read these cases, then by all means click on these. Most lawyers, and no offense to anyone if you're a lawyer, but most lawyers do not say something simple in 1 or 2 words. It's a lot of words. So a lot of times these cases are usually 3 to 11 plus pages long. But when you read them, you will get a lot more insight into the thinking that was going on and why they came up with the decision that they came up with. So just looking at, and this is where you see in the green, that's the example where I was telling you about if it made it through the SEC versus the SEC and the Commissioner of Education. The first one was a recommended reprimand, second one was a reprimand. That means the second one went through both. So in the first case, the board member copied and pasted information from a board email, and that information was considered confidential. Can't do it, okay? Those emails that you're getting, you can't copy and send out to somebody else. It's confidential information. Second one, using board email can give the impression statements were made on behalf of the board. Board email, board business. Personal email, personal business. Always keep them separate, because if you're using your personal email for board business, somebody can Oprah your personal email accounts then as a result of that. That's why you use a board email account. Next one is a member contacted vendors and districts for prices. Business administrators love this. Not, they don't, okay? There's so many rules and regulations with purchases that is not your job as a board member to go figure out what's the best product or the best price. That's his job. It's okay though if you go to say like workshop for New Jersey school boards and you see vendors there and you see a product and you think it's a really good product, by all means, you can grab a business card and you can hand that business card to either the BA or the superintendent and say, hey, you might want to check this out. This looked really interesting. That's okay. That's appropriate. Turning to the vendor and saying, hey, can you come on Thursday at 11 o'clock for a demo, please? That's not appropriate, okay, because that's now doing something. Okay, so never do that. The next one, board email to express personal views. Personal views, personal email, board views, board email. This is another one. The first one I think is interesting because it's the member accused the superintendent of changing the graduation day because of a personal conflict. And then at that same board member when there was a music director, chorus director, they wanted them to play at some event. The chorus director couldn't do it for whatever reason. And the board member was annoyed, so they actually went right to the chorus director and said, why can't you do it? I want you to do this. Do you remember I said about protecting staff members? That's the example of it. You cannot go directly to that staff member. That's the superintendent's job or the principal's job to do that. Next one, meeting with members of the public to discuss a highly divisive board action to change a holiday name. It's not your job to meet with individuals in the community to discuss board business, okay? Board business stays here at the board table. This one I think is the best one. The board president lost the election. They directed the board attorney to conduct research on another board member who actually campaigned against him and obviously won. Why is this wrong? Well, I think that's pretty obvious. And you would think a lot of these things are common sense. Like you would think, what were they thinking? But that individual was using district funds for a personal vendetta. So you can't do that. So these are a list of prohibited acts. So if you fall into one of these, you would have to recuse yourself, and we're going to talk about recusing, but you would have to recuse yourself in a vote if they fall within any of these. So what is a recusal? A lot of boards don't know what a recusal is. It's something that's being talked about just recently. Most board meetings, when you don't want to vote on something because you don't have enough information or you're conflicted, people have abstained from the vote. An abstention should only be used when you don't have enough information. Perfect example, I wasn't at the last board meeting. This board meeting, you're approving the board minutes from the last board meeting. You weren't there. That's a very appropriate time to abstain from that vote. If you're legally conflicted, meaning even though you might want to vote on something, but you're not permitted to vote on something, that's when you should recuse yourself. That sends a different message to the community. It's not saying that you're afraid to vote. It's not saying that you don't want to take on that vote. It's saying you can't vote. Even though you might want to, you can't vote for it because you're legally not allowed to. And this is important because if you were supposed to recuse yourself and you didn't and you voted, let's say that agenda item was a really close vote. It just passed by one vote or missed by one vote, okay, failed by a vote. If you voted and you weren't supposed to, that vote becomes null and void. So let's say you hired somebody and somebody discovers later that you shouldn't have been voting on it. That person that thought they just took the job and all the ramifications of doing that, now all of a sudden finds out, no, I really didn't get the job. So it can have major ramifications. So if you're conflicted, please recuse yourself. Do not vote on something. So these are relationship definitions. And when you look at this, immediate family members, what you would expect, and relative is a nice long list. These are all the different relationships that could potentially create a conflict for you within the school district as a board member. If you know about the new sick leave law that came out recently, they used this as their definition, and then they added one nice little caveat to it. They said that staff members can actually take sick days for all these different individuals, plus if somebody is not really a relative, but they're just like a relative, they feel like their family, you can take a sick day too. So that has not made its way into this relationship definition yet. So be on the lookout for that, because when you tend to see something happen in one area, it sometimes rolls over into another area. So even though, you know, if you're working in the district and you might take off because your neighbor's sick and they're just like a family member, that won't necessarily affect you as a board member at this point in time. So you can still take off when it's a sick neighbor and you can still vote on things. But so these are all the relationships. In the paper, the 3 pages that I gave you, the third page in that is this. This is a nice handy chart. This came out of an advisory opinion because every school district struggles, every board struggles with trying to determine whether they're conflicted or not. This is a nice little handy chart. However, even though it's a nice handy chart and you should reference it to try to make preliminary determinations what you might be, if somebody creates a conflict for you, you only should be sharing your full details with your board attorney to make that determination. Because your board attorney will tell you what you can and can't vote on, what committees you can and can't be on, what different things that you can't be involved in, whether it's a superintendent evaluation, if there was a superintendent search, if there's a contract, all those things, they'll tell you whether you can or can't be involved in those. And that's based upon your conflicts. But this is a nice little handy chart. So as a board member, you might have family members that currently work in the district, and that's okay. However, that does create conflicts for you. And also, when you become a board member, you cannot hire any more of your family members. And you have policy for that, but you're not allowed to do that. There is one little exception to that. And that is if there's a really, really, really difficult position to fill, it's posted, and the only person that applied for it was your family member. The superintendent can reach out to the executive county superintendent and ask for a waiver and explain the situation. Generally, the executive county superintendent will instruct her to please post it again, see if he gets somebody else. Chances are you're not going to. And then they can approve that waiver and say, yes, you can hire that board member's family member. However, once that board member has that family member in the district, you're now conflicted and you can't vote in anything in those areas or be involved in things in those areas, which once again will go back to the board attorney to get direction on what you can and can't be involved in. So this is a nice chart, and it gives you some of the, I think, a really good idea of the complexities and why you go to the board attorney. But collective bargaining is one area that you could potentially be conflicted within based upon relationships. And if you just use spouse as an example, if you look at the first row, spouse, that's your spouse as a board member, they work in the district as a teacher or in whatever role, okay? Let's say they're a teacher. That would mean that you were conflicted and you could not participate in negotiations, nor could you vote to ratify the contract. However, if your spouse works outside of the district, you might not be able to participate in negotiations, but you can vote to ratify the contract. But notice there's a little asterisk there. That changes if that family member that works outside the district holds a position of power within the union, meaning they're a president, vice president, treasurer, chief negotiator, building rep, something along those lines. That might cause you not to be able to vote to ratify the contract. And that's why it's so important to share all the specific details of your situation with your board attorney so they can help make that determination of what you can and can't be involved in. This is just other conflicts, and then in the orange section, that advisory opinion, is an interesting one. As a board member, sometimes you're endorsed by different groups when you're running for the board. If you're endorsed by a local education association, years ago, that would knock you out of negotiations. So here's what was happening, and this is why this advisory opinion came out. Board member A runs on the platform of, we want to give 0% raise to all the teachers. So do you think any of the teachers in the teachers union wants that board member on the board? No. So what do? They endorse them. That knocks them out of negotiations. Pretty smart, right? So what happened was somebody wrote for an advisory opinion. Yes, it had a far-reaching impact. So this was a published one. And so what they changed in this was that not only do you have to be endorsed, but they have to actually give you financial contributions. So now that took away that power for the union to be able to say, I endorse you, to knock you out of negotiations. They actually had to say, I endorse you, and then give you money, and you have to accept the money as, for your campaign. So that's like an interesting one that came out. So I'm not going to go through all these cases, but these are prohibited acts, and these are a combination of conflict cases as well as advisory opinions, and that's why on the column on the right it says advice and outcome. Advice is the advice from the advisory opinion. Outcome is the outcome from the ethics complaint. You'll know if it's an ethics complaint if it has a C, and if it's an advisory opinion, it starts off with an A. So that's the hyperlinks on the left-hand side. This case is an interesting one because it was a recent one in 2022, and this was in the same district where the board president had a child that was an instructional assistant in the district. So remember, it's the board president. So as a result of that, that knocked the board president out of being able to be on any of the committees that were related to personnel, negotiations, instructional, which means curriculum and instruction, and the finance committees. That's a lot to get knocked out of. On top of that, one of the roles of the board president is to appoint board members to the different committees. They weren't allowed to do that either. So, and that was all because they had a conflict because their child worked in the district. In that same district, at the same board meeting, same year, there was another board member whose spouse was the 10-month technology department employee. As a result of that, that person was not allowed to be involved in any of the committees related to personnel negotiations and/or finance. I would also argue they probably shouldn't have been involved in curriculum instruction because technology and curriculum instruction are so interwoven. But I'm not an attorney. I don't write advisory opinions. I can just read them. So that's what they had determined. So understand that a conflict can also impact your ability to be on or even appoint to committees. Executive session. These are just two cases where executive session, these are ones where I say, duh, what were you thinking? The first one is the member attended the executive session discussion on the candidates to fill a vacant board seat. The husband applied. So as a board member, their husband was applying for the vacant seat. Do you think they're conflicted? Yes. You don't even need a board attorney to tell you that. Instead, they sat in on the interviews with the board and then the discussion that happened in executive session. The second case, the board president attended multiple discussions on matter involving their spouse who happens to work in the district. And the other members of the board were unaware that that was the case, that it was their spouse. Why? Because in a lot of districts, not all, staff appointments or staff issues are usually using staff numbers. Same thing as with students to protect their identity, but not in all districts. The district I worked in, we didn't do that unless it was a really sensitive thing, then we did use numbers. So the other board members didn't know that's who that person was. The board member did. They knew it was their spouse. So when it came time for the discussion, in both these cases, they actually consulted with the board attorney, and the board attorney told them, yes, you can be involved. And you say, well, then that should be okay, right? No. It was determined that even though the board attorney gave them that advice, common sense says you shouldn't have been involved. So you as board members are required to use something called common sense. So use that as well. Volunteering in school. As a board member, a lot of times you get on the board because you want to be actively involved in the school, and a lot of times you've been volunteering in some way, shape, or form. It's okay to be a volunteer and a board member. However, you have to watch two things: the degree of involvement, meaning how often you're in the buildings. So if you're in there once a week, that's fine. If you're in there 3 times a week, that's probably a problem. Why? Because that gives the impression that you're running the building or running people in the building. And that's the degree of authority. So depending on what your volunteer position is, if you're in a position where you're overseeing staff members and giving them directions, you probably shouldn't be in that. Now, this has come up where people have asked about, can you be involved in the PTO? Yes, you can be. That's totally fine. Can you even be a president or a vice president of the PTO? You can. However, it depends on your PTO. Some PTOs are very, I would say, basic. They don't do a heck of a lot. They might do like class parties and things like that, but they're not that involved. In that case, yes, you're totally fine. If you have a very, very active PTO where you're running a lot of different things, you probably should not be the president or vice president because you're now in a position where you're giving directions. Regardless of what volunteering you do not touch money, which is a good thing. Because now, when you're volunteering for something and everyone always wants somebody else to handle the money, and they say, can you handle the money? You can say, no, I can't, I'm a board member, I'm not supposed to handle money. Don't handle it, okay? It has been asked, what if you're working like at a sports thing and you're in the food shack and is that okay to take $2 for a hot dog? Yes, it is, but don't be the person that's gonna count up the money at the end of the night or deposit the money or do anything with the money beyond that, okay? So for voting, once again, as board members, you are required to vote according to the law. So you can vote yes or no on any agenda item. However, you can't have an agenda item that you're voting on that actually violates the law. Social media. Social media. Social media has become the bane of everyone's existence. I always say, people that sometimes write behind the keyboard, behind the screen, some people will say keyboard cowboys because they'll say things behind the screen that they would never say to somebody in person. So it's important that as a board member, you're holding yourself up to a different level. And you have to be careful of the content of your speech. So as a board member, if you're commenting on anything to do with on social media, for anything that has to be related in any way, shape, or form to board business, you shouldn't be doing that. There's only one person who's a spokesperson for the board, and that's the board president. So if anyone's going to comment on how the board feels on a particular item on social media or anywhere else, that should only be the board president, and it should be based upon what the board has determined as being the majority view of it. So your personal accounts, do not comment on board business. Can you still be on social media? Absolutely. Can you still like things? And that's on the next page. But can you do all that stuff that you normally do? Can you post things? Yes, you can do that. So for example, let's say it's snowing. Thank God that's over, we hope, right? Though tonight it's going to get really cold. But let's say it snows. Can you comment about the snow and how much there is and all of that stuff? By all means, yes, you can. However, can you comment and say, oh, that stupid superintendent gave us a snow day. It wasn't that bad. No, you can't. That's board business. Okay? So think before you write. Take a moment to think before you write and then before you post. So content of the speech will have a huge play in whether what you're saying is a violation or not. On social media, this is just an example where somebody wrote about that they're speaking on behalf of being a private citizen. However, they actually spoke, even though they were saying they were a private citizen and they were really a board member, they actually spoke about board business. You can't do that. You're board members. Everyone knows you're board members. So you cannot do that. When you do post, you should be using a disclaimer. And this is a sample disclaimer. This is the one that the SEC recommends. And the reason why they recommend this, and even though you're not required to post using this, they recommend this because they've looked at the language, they've developed the language, and they feel it captures what they want it to capture. Can you change it, which is on this slide? Yeah, you could change it, but the reality is when we change things, we sometimes miss the essence of what it was supposed to be saying. So if you're going to use the disclaimer, use it, but make sure you kind of use the same verbiage. So this is just like a Q&A. If you use the disclaimer, does that automatically make you okay? No. Why? Content is the most important part. The same thing as if I don't use the disclaimer, am I automatically wrong? No, you're not. If your content is good, it didn't matter whether you had the disclaimer or not. So content and perception matter. Perception is another part of it. So even though you might not have the intent to say something in a certain way, if the public can have the impression that that's what you were thinking or that's the way you were seeing it, then that could become a problem for you. So once again, think before you write and post. So if you're a board member that ran under a platform and you use social media when you were running, do not use that social media page anymore because all your posts from the previous are still there. So anything you post moving forward, now that you're a board member, all those previous thoughts that you had can be considered from the community as being the position of the board where it's obviously not, it was your own at that time. Can you still like and share things? Yes, you can. Once again, you can like the weather, you can like the fact that the sports team won a state title, you can do all of that. You can even comment on that stuff. But if it has to do with board business, stay away from it. Even if somebody else writes something nasty about the district or people in the district or the actions of the district, do not like it or repost it or even comment on it. Let it go. The last part, I think, is the most important, which is refrain from inappropriate communications. We expect for our students to hold themselves up to a level of talking nicely to each other and behaving nicely to each other. We expect our staff to be the role models for them. You're no different than the staff. You are a role model, and you're in a very public position. So you, once again, have to think about not just the content of what you're posting, but also whether what you're saying is appropriate or inappropriate. Are you using foul language? Don't do it, because students will see that, and that gives a very negative impression of the whole board. So communication. Public comment, and every district does their public comment differently. You guys have a nice which I'm glad you did not start it at 3 minutes because I would have been in trouble. But you have a nice little timer there. Every district does it differently. Some do 2 minutes, so they change it. I've seen some districts where they have multiple things. They have some right on the thing. Some don't have anything. But public comments, the public needs to understand, and as a board, you need to understand that as a board, you are conducting board business in public, not with the public. It's a different kind of meeting than maybe a local meeting, not, a county meeting. This is in public. So that means that even though the community has an opportunity to speak, it's called public comment. It's not called public dialogue. It's not called public either. It's not called public dialogue. So as a board member, your job should be to listen. And I always suggest that you're going to listen, and you're not going to say I agree or I disagree, because now you're giving an opinion. You just listen and be respectful, and they do their 3 minutes, and then they sit down. That doesn't mean that you disregarded what they said. Some people, and I'm one of those, I would take notes while public comment was going on. I wouldn't make a comment during the board meeting. And the reason why is because when you make a comment in the heat of the moment, especially if it's somebody attacking you, you might say the wrong thing. And the wrong thing meaning that you're speaking from your heart, from your emotions, and you haven't thought about your response. And that's never good for anybody. So I always recommend that when you're in a board meeting, listen. Remember what you did tonight. The board president is the spokesperson for the board. Okay? Always redirect your public back to that it's, if they're addressing another board member. As a board member, you guys all have to remember too that your board president is your spokesperson. So as much as you might want to respond, don't. Let your board president, that's her wonderful high-paying job that she's doing. That's her job to do. Okay? I always say thank you for your public comment, and really mean it. We really do appreciate when the public has comments. It gives us different perspective on whatever's going on. It doesn't matter whether we agree with it or not. It gives us a different perspective. Close your public comment. If for some reason at that point you want to make a comment back or answer something because it's real easy, that's okay to do, but public comment is now closed. So as a board, you can now respond, and no one can respond back to you. I personally, unless it's a really easy question that you can answer, like if they're saying, can you tell us when the next school dance is? Okay, close your public comment, and if you know when the next school dance is, by all means, go ahead and say that. However, I always say wait till the next board meeting before you respond. Why? Because that gives you time to think about it. It gives you time to digest what has been shared with you and actually look into it. And at the next board meeting, you may decide to respond. You may decide not to, and that's okay too. But that's how I recommend you handle public comment, because once again, it's a board meeting in public, not with the public. As a board member, your job is to communicate with the community. And when I say that, you are a representative of the local community. You're in the community. You know what's going on. Everyone in the community comes to you with their concerns, whether they like something, dislike something, doesn't make a difference. It's okay, once again, to listen to that and say, thank you for sharing that. I will let the superintendent know. That's it. But you're also ambassadors to the community, which means there are great things going on in your district. Every district has problems and every district has great things. Put it out there. How do you do it as a board? Invite your kids here. You guys did it tonight. That was awesome. Showcase what the kids are doing. That's the best way to be an ambassador to the community. You guys are live streaming or at least recording, I don't know if it's live stream or not, but you're recording and live streaming the board meetings. Your community could be watching. That's a great time to showcase the great things going on in your district. You could have, administrators come, you could have teachers come and present what's going on in the buildings. Those are great ways for you as a board to allow yourselves to be the ambassadors to the community. Points to consider: New Jersey School Boards does recommend that you develop a list of board members and administrators who have a conflict of interest and review it regularly, because although I might not have a conflict today, my daughter might graduate from school, be a teacher, and all of a sudden now I might be conflicted. So as your situation changes, I recommend that you reach out to your board attorney, let them know what your situation is, how it's changed, and then let them guide you accordingly. Consult with your board attorney on any ethics issues and to identify conflicted members and administrators. And then for New Jersey school boards, we do offer school board notes, and that is really good resource for seeing what's going on, what are some of the trends that are going on in the legislature, to see what laws are happening or being considered. So reading that and keeping up to date on that will really keep you well informed. And just as a reminder in closing, board members may not deliberately disregard and ignore the ethical standards that they are required by law to uphold and enforce. When board members do so, it not only threatens the integrity of the board, it also unnecessarily compromises district personnel and subverts the very purpose for which board members are elected, namely to serve the needs of the school district. And to me, the only reason why you're here is the students. That's who you're here to serve. Not the teachers, not the administrators, not yourselves, not the community. You're here for the students. So keep that as your central focus and you guys will be perfect. Those are just some links to some resources. When I send out the email to you, I'll also include, because like I said, I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to cases, I'll give you, besides all the PDF will have all those links in it, but all advisory and conflict of interest cases, I'll send you 2 links for that as well. Okay, so you'll have all of that. Any questions? Yep.
2 points, or well, actually 4, but has this presentation ever been improved for continuing legal ed ethics credits?
What do you mean for legal ethics
I'm
credits?
an attorney. I have to get ethics credits, and this really looks like it would fit the bill.
I don't know. I can actually check with our legal team because
Thank you.
this is actually developed by our legal team.
This is 1 hour. And
Yes, it
4
is.
every 2 years.
Well, as
This
your
was
board,
excellent.
you actually get 1 hour of credit. How's that?
Thank you.
But I will check into that
But if
because
you send me the PowerPoint, I could submit it myself and see
You
if
can.
it'll been approved. But if it's already
I'll-
been approved somewhere else, that might be helpful to me and any other lawyers who may have served on the board.
yeah.
And
So you took offense to my comment about the the attorneys
Not at
being
all.
wordy, huh?
I did have a question about when you were talking about the how and the what.
Mm-hmm.
There are some instances where I can see us in the policy making, drafting the policy here, where some of those policies do dictate the how. Do you see any potential issues there?
It really shouldn't. It should be, for example, like let's say it's attendance. I'll just use that as an example, okay? I don't know what policy I'm thinking of, but let's say it's attendance policy, and what will be that the school district mandates that students will be in school as often as possible, and that there will be some kind of procedure in place to notify parents when a student is, increasing the number of absences. That's the what. The how would be, how are they going to do it? That's the regulation. That's when they would sit there and say, okay, first step will be we're going to send a letter at 3 days absent. Then we're going to send a second one at 5 days and 8 days. Then we're going to start to visit the house. We're going to take them to court. Whatever the case may be, that's the how of how they're going to do it. Yours is more of the what. So even when you read your, and I would recommend this too, when you write a policy, because you don't always have to take the policies that are written by whoever your policy advisor is, whether it's Strauss Esme or school boards or somebody else. You can actually create your own policies. However, your policies have to be in accordance with the law. So if you decide to write your own policy, make sure you submit it. First run it by your attorney, your board attorney, and then submit it to whoever your policy provider is to review it. Because if you put something in your policy that's against the law, your policy doesn't mean anything because it has to be in accordance with the law. And if you look at any of your policies, at the bottom of them, they always do the references to all the different laws and advisory opinions and other cases that may be impacted by it.
That did not answer my question. So I'm going to
yes,
try this again.
The answer is, for the most part, yes.
Okay.
You are still saying what. The how is those specifics of what they're going to do. That would still be a what, though, with you saying
Okay.
we want an absentee policy.
That's fine. And I just wanted to say thank you because I thought this presentation was an excellent education for not just us, but for the public as to what we can and cannot do as a board as far as commenting, during public comment, or commenting on social media, or commenting in general. So I think that's a really great reminder for the entire community, and I say thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I want to chime in next.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. This was an excellent presentation. I enjoy sitting through this last time, and for the first time seeing your presentation, because it was a little different flavor. I like the staying in your lane, but I do take a little offense to how it's coined. And it says, we are no different from any other citizen except when we're in a quorum. That's incorrect. We actually have less rights than a citizen if we were in, regardless of the quorum, we have less rights because we're not able to comment on anything having to do with the school community. And I would ask could you go back a few slides to,
Just tell me where to
there's the
start.
one on
Stop.
social media that had to do with advisory opinion A222. There it is. This is an excellent case. Do you know why I know that? Because this was my advisory opinion.
Oh, really?
So I'm glad that I made the list
You made
of
the
things
list.
not to do.
I did not know that.
I asked for that advisory opinion because this was during COVID. And as a private citizen, and not only a board member, but a professional in another district, I'm not allowed to give any information on anything. I can't even, to your example, about giving a date on something. If I were to go on social media, the SEC's decision was the public is too stupid for them to recognize that you're speaking in a capacity, even if you're just passing on a link to a resource that's publicly available someplace else. The way that the state and SEC has handled this has been very conservative. I understand why. We have attorneys involved. But again, I will stress, we have less rights than the average citizen does when it comes to being able to comment on any policy, including trying to guide members of our public to even just informational resources on benign things.
Right.
So I like how you guys framed it. I understand what everything is there. I'm glad to see that I made the big leagues, and I'm happy to send you a copy of this opinion if you'd like to read what the
Everyone
circumstances
can. They can
were.
click the link, and they.
I didn't know it was
They might
public.
even
They-
see your name.
It's funny because when it first went out, I asked if it was public, and they said no, and I guess it has to go through a process.
Yeah.
This must be new.
You're famous.
I am. I'm gonna go look this up now. But yeah, this was. The context of this was during COVID and putting together a line of communication between the BOE and parents, because there was a lot of information that was coming out fast from the state that to try to redirect that to people that had a lot of questions with what was going on. They're showing up to our board meetings.
Sure.
Trying to get that information out in real time was difficult. So, after some back and forth, there were differing opinions, and I reached out in order to figure that out. And honestly, the response from the SEC was disturbing. It was that your public is not able to handle the truth, and they're not able to discern whether or not you're trying to help them or speak on behalf of the board. It's absolutely insane how far the pendulum has swung to one side with us being able to respond to just anything.
Right.
And so that was my 5 minutes, but thank you for coming out. I
Oh, no
appreciate this every year. It's a great thing. Oh, and I will say, for disclosure statements, the best time to do that for the new folks, right after you do your taxes. It goes like hand in hand. I think they did that on purpose, the April 30th, because you can do your taxes, you
yeah.
can get all the information for your disclosure statement, put it in, and you're good to go.
Just make sure you get it in by the April 30th deadline.
Yeah, and make sure you get your taxes in on time, too.
No, but was it last year or the year before they changed the date?
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
anyone else?
Dr. Tehan, thank you so
other
much.
question.
Oh, who do we have? Ken? Oh, sorry, Mr. Wondrak, go right ahead.
So there's two issues that are floating around, and I'm wondering how the school boards are looking at this. One is about the libraries and content, and the other one is about changing the age of consent from 16 to 14 for students who feel that they have a mental or emotional problem without informing the parents.
Both of those are currently going through governmental relations. So if you were to contact our governmental relations people, Jonathan Pushman's one of them, they can tell you where their current position is, but they're still looking into it. There's a lot of misinformation about the mental health one. The policy that itself, that legislation didn't change. It only changed the age from 16 to 14. But I actually was just talking with him today about that, so I don't know all the details of it, per se, because that's something that he heads. But he would be one that you could actually email and ask him, what is NJ School Board's current position on both these topics. But they're hot button topics right now.
Oh, I know.
Yep. Now I guess you're good.
Okay. So Dr. Tian, I was hoping, and maybe we should have done this earlier, this is a great presentation. Could you just give us just like a 60-second background on how it is that you came to New Jersey School Boards in terms of what your previous experiences? I think it's very important to understand who is delivering this information to us, because I know you have a wealth of experience, and I would just like to get that in there.
Well, I think the most important thing is, I said, kids are the biggest thing of what we do in education, and I have 6 of them. And I'm a lot older than you think. I actually have 3 grandkids and 2 more on the way. So I believe in public education. I believe in creating great schools for our kids, because they are our future, and hopefully they will be the ones supporting us in the future. So, and if not, hopefully they're not putting me in a nursing home somewhere, but you never know. In terms of my experience, I've been in education for a little over 25 years. I have served in all sorts of capacities. I've been a teacher. I've been a building administrator as a principal. I was actually called a building administrator. That's another long story. I wasn't a principal or assistant principal. I was a vice principal and a building administrator. I've been a superintendent. I've been it's called academic achievement officer, which was a district level position. So I've had all those different hats. On the teaching side of it, I was actually very involved in the association. I was chief negotiator for contracts, so I've seen that aspect of it. So I would say I'm well-rounded in all those areas. I also have a lot of experience outside of education. I've never been an attorney, but I have worked very closely with attorneys. I have very good relationships with attorneys. But I've owned my own business, so I can see it from a taxpayer side, business person. I've managed amusement park. I've pretty much done, as people that know me say, you've done everything. And I have. I've had many different jobs. I've worked in the hospital as a respiratory therapist. So you name it, I probably have done it. And most of the time, I don't have just one job. I have multiple jobs. I'm an adjunct at 2 universities. Though ever since COVID hit, they've kind of moved that to the regular staff when COVID hit. So I took that as an opportunity to back off a little bit. I also mentor new administrators and through New Jersey Leader to Leader. So yeah, I'm just very involved. And so when this opportunity, I decided to retire. And so that's why I said I'm a little older than you think. And I retired for about a month and a half. And then this opportunity I saw pop up. And so I applied for it. I didn't know if I would get it. And here I am. So it's been different. It's definitely different. One of the things I say is, being in the district, you're in the midst of all the chaos that happens within the district. So for me, I get to go now from district to district and see both the good things and the chaos that's going on, but I get to go home. So that's a good thing. So it is nice to talk to board members, and as a superintendent, I was a non-voting board member. Your superintendent is a non-voting board member, and they have intimate knowledge of everything that goes on with the board and with a school district. So that's pretty much it. Anything else on that?
Thank you so much for sharing that. Well-rounded is an understatement, and again, it's another whole unique perspective that you have. So we look forward to continuing a relationship with you. Ms. Friedman was fantastic with us and really pointed us in the direction that I think has been favorable for us. I am pleased to let you know that in terms of student showcasing and staff showcasing, that is something that we absolutely work on, and we've absolutely been working. And Ms. Friedman was instrumental in helping us create and kind of put our policy regarding public comment into
Oh, good.
action last year, and I think it's been, personally, I think it's been positive for our community. So we look forward to partnering with you, and I hope you're excited to partner with us,
I always
because I'll
am.
be calling, I'm sure.
That's fine.
But I appreciate everything that you've shared with us this evening, and we look forward to receiving the presentation
Yep,
via
I
email.
will send it
and
tonight.
We'll make sure that that gets out to all of our board members.
Great.
Does anyone have anything else for this evening?
Do we need to sign this and give it to Mr.
So,
Smythe?
yeah, what I was going to say to you before, in the beginning, the first page is the 10 tenets, so it's a nice little cheat sheet that you can always keep with you everywhere you go, so that you don't violate any of the ethics tenets. The second page is just a sign-off, and you can sign those and give those to the BA. He can hold those, and it just means that you've received your ethics training, so that when CUSAC comes around and they ask that question, he can say, yep, look, I have all the evidence. Even though it is on your board agenda and you have that as evidence, this is a nice little backup as well. So if the DOE gives you any hard time, you have that. And the third one's just the one I said it was.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All
Thank
right.
you.
At this time, may I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Second, Mr. Nasser, thank you very much. All in favor? All right. Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks for all your hard work this week.